The 12 men and women hearing this chilling audio recording of Byron fatally shooting teenagers Nicholas Brady and Haley Kiefer after they broke into his home in Little Falls, Minnesota.
It's all fun, cool, exciting, highly profitable, until somebody kills you.
The prosecution then plays them that recording of Byron sharing his inner thoughts with himself in an eerie whisper as the kids' bullet-riddled bodies lie on his basement floor.
I was doing my civic duty. I had to do it.
He's trying to convince himself that he had a legal right to do it because, after all, they entered his dwelling.
But defense attorney Steve Meshbesher insists to the jury that Byron did indeed have that right.
He was scared. He was just scared.
Prosecutor Pete Orpett argues that Byron had nothing to be scared of after already disabling the kids with his rifle. But then kept shooting anyway after allegedly luring them into his house to extract vengeance for previous burglaries at his home.
Basically, he was almost lying in wait.
That's how we viewed it. My argument to the jury was, this is, you know, because people in Minnesota are big deer hunters, and I said, isn't this just like deer hunting?
And the prosecution portrays Nick, 17, and Haley, 18, as about as threatening as deer.
Were Nick and Haley involved in previous burglaries? Did they have a record?
I think they were on the radar for some couple other minor possible break-ins and that, and just a little mischievous stuff, but nothing that was serious.
Byron is said to have even known Nick, who'd done some summer work for him on his house.
He had hired Nick and a couple of other Nick's friends to come over his house and rake his lawn, mow his grass, clean out his garage.
But defense attorney Meshbesher claims Nick and his buddies had taken that opportunity to case the joint.
Nick Brady, unbeknownst to Byron, was sizing up his home. He was checking it out for a future burglary with a number of other friends of his, along with Miss Kiefer.
But the prosecution says Byron should then have recognized Nick after he and Haley tried to break into his house. The defense argues there's no way Byron could have identified the intruders, known how old they were, or determined if they were unarmed.
They came in with hoods covering their face, and you can't determine the age of a person when they have hoods on. You don't know if they're armed or not. When they have a coat on protecting them, they can have a firearm inside that coat and hidden from view.
In fact, Byron's attorney claims Nick was actually suspected in some of the earlier break-ins.
Mr. Byron did not go up the stairs looking for him. He hid in the basement to protect his own safety. He was frightened. He didn't know who it was. He couldn't see his face. And he shot the person who had broken into his home to protect himself and his home.
The prosecution tells the jury the truth lies in the tape. Claiming Byron had plenty of time to find out before unloading a total of 9 rifle and pistol shots into Nick and Haley.
And the jury didn't have a question because it was all recorded. They knew what happened. They could hear him, like when he's shooting Haley.
You're dying.
And he's saying that while he's shooting her. I mean, it's hard to hear.
But defense attorney Meshbesher says Byron continued to shoot after already stopping Nick and Haley in their tracks because of a phenomenon known as the fog of battle.
Did he have to unload on those teenagers without a doubt, without a chance of them surviving?
I have represented police officers in the past, and a lot of times when they're in a stressful situation, they cannot tell how many times they shoot. They pull the trigger out of fear, and it's instinctive in all human beings. They shoot and pull the trigger several times, and they can't remember the number of times they pulled the trigger.
Meshmesher says the fog of battle phenomenon also explains why Byron didn't dial 911 the moment he spotted the teens at his house on his surveillance monitors, or even right after he'd killed them.
Why did Byron decide to wait 24 hours until the next day to call police?
Very simple. He was scared that there was other people involved. He was scared that they'd be coming in from the outside. He was afraid that if he went outside and immediately called the police, he'd be shot, maybe even with his own guns that had been stolen by a third or fourth party.
But the jury doesn't buy it, taking just several hours to find Byron Smith guilty of the first and second degree murder of Nick Brady and Haley Kiefer. The judge sentencing him to life without parole.
I think jurors had the idea that this little old man is getting rung up by the big state government. But within a day or two of hearing the evidence, I think that changed their minds.
These kids didn't have to die.
I believe they did not. I think it was an execution of two kids that did not pose a threat to him at any time.
Heartbroken and angry family members of Nick and Haley couldn't agree more.
Played judge, jury, prosecutor, executioner, and took their lives. And he did it on purpose, and he planned it.
And Nick's mother is disgusted that Byron Smith continued to feel justified in killing the teens.
I don't believe he felt remorse. That alone would have been something, but I don't believe he felt that.
But there are those in Little Falls, Minnesota who still believe Byron Smith did nothing wrong, including his next-door neighbor, Bill Anderson.
You're saying that he had the right to do what he did,
Yes,
and you're saying you would have done the same thing.
I would have done the same thing.
Still, others who initially stood up for Byron Smith, including longtime friend John Lang, now concede the old man went too far.
Byron Smith made some mistakes. There's no doubt about it. He should have called the cops right away, and he obviously snapped.
And Byron's biggest mistake, apart from heartlessly taking two young lives?
You're dying.
Recording what he did and trying to explain it to himself.
How did this recording hurt Byron?
Well, what it did was it brought the jury right there. You know, usually you're asking a jury, what was his state of mind? I'll tell you what his state of mind is. Listen to it.
I give a damn who she is. It's all fun, cool, exciting, highly profitable, until somebody kills you.
So far, all of Byron's appeals have been denied. His lawyer recently filed for a new appeal in federal court and is still waiting on a decision. Now, we want to hear from you. If you were on the jury, would you have found Byron Smith guilty of murder? Join the discussion right now on our Facebook page. I'm Chris Hansen. If you like this story, make sure you tune in every day to Crime Watch Daily. You can find where the show airs in your city at crimewatchdaily.com. Watch it live or record it on your DVR and watch it at night. And to all those criminals out there, remember, we are watching.